morning, Internet. My name is Ash and welcome to a thing. I've noticed recently that, for me at least, writing is best when it's sporadic. I can't really sit down and force myself to be creative unless I really want to, and even then, I can only really get the finished product up to maybe 60 to 70% of what I can do, maximum. So when I'm actually in the mood to write something, I just word barf ideas like this, just idea after weird ass idea. But of course, with methods like that, you're bound to get some weird shit mixed in. I forget where I heard it first, but I swear to God, I heard somebody say, I think it was like a TED Talk or something like that, somebody said that it takes 10 ideas within a single sitting, whatever you consider a sitting to be, to have more original and unique ideas start to surface. Do y'all ever wonder why cancer happens? Not in the why, God, why did it have to be grandma kind of way. More in a biological sense. That was my grandmother used to have cancer. I'm sorry. There are probably some viewers with grandmas who have cancer, and to you, I am very sorry. I hope she gets better. Why did I say that? No, the real question should be, why did I write it? But anyway, we are talking about the biological sense here. I'm not saying that it makes sense for your grandmother to die, okay? I'm not gonna go into detail because it's not the point! But basically, evolution happens when your genes do a sort of backflip of some kind. But of course, front flips are easier. Or are they? I don't know. Actually, I think Crank Gameplays mentioned it in an Unis Vanis video that backflips are easier than front flips. I'm not entirely sure if he said that. Let me go check. Memento mori, my friends. Memento mori. But just as front flips are more intuitive to the human body, having your genes do a front flip and accidentally create something terrible is somehow more intuitive than evolution. Ergo, cancer. But without cancer, we wouldn't have evolution through mutation and natural selection and stuff like that. And likewise, for every writing idea that I have that creates a 30 to 70 page manuscript, there are tons of just lumps of terrible cancers hanging out in my brain, which I will now give to you. Yay! I think I've already talked about this in a previous video, but get this, it's Soul Eater crossed with your lion, April. Let me explain, if explain is a word that you can use to describe this incomprehensible crap, but I guess you need to know what those two anime are if you're gonna understand this idea. So that first anime, Soul Eater, here's the cover art, is about a world where some people can turn into weapons and other people, they're called Meisters. There's this thing called soul resonance, and when it happens, then the Meister can wield that person when they transform into a weapon, and they use that technique to beat bad guys who are called the Eggs of Kishin, which is an entirely separate thing which we are not gonna get into because it's not important. So my idea was that instead of turning into weapons and beating bad guys, they turn into musical instruments and beat competitions. And here's where Your Lion April comes in. So Your Lion April, cover art here, that's the main character. His name's Arima Kosei, he's kind of a bitch. Kosei was forced to practice like 8 hours a day when he was a 7-year-old child on the piano because his mother, and she actually ended up dying. That's not a spoiler, you learn in the first episode, don't worry. And after that, he quits playing piano for a few years. And then there's this girl called Miyazo Kaori, and she gets Kosei to accompany her for a classical piece that they play together at a competition. And while they don't win, that kind of pushes him back to the piano and confronts his trauma about his mom and stuff like that. And then throughout the rest of the show, he starts to get back into it, processing trauma and other stuff like that, practicing other competitions, meeting past rivals. So in this world, Kosei is a violinist, and instead of his mom being the one who died, it was his violin that died. And so when not Kaori, whatever, this was a terrible book idea anyway, she's not a violinist, she is a person that can turn into a violin. And so he starts playing the instrument again because he has finally found a partner to play it with again, who he can play. Yeah. I wanted it to kind of be a love story, but also kind of not, because romance would kind of draw away from the themes of, like, reclaiming lost and corrupted passion. I wanted to go off of this line that I think I heard Eddie Chen of Two Set Violin, this guy, he's a YouTuber. He said that when he was, like, in high school, he had a violin teacher that told him, "You're a great violinist, you just need to live life a little bit more." And I think that's a really brilliant phrase. And that's kind of like the key to the success of the two characters as a pair as the story goes on, because the thing about it is that there's a lot of prodigies who just practice like 10 hours a day no matter what, and they're just like insane Chloe Chua, Paganini Anna when they're like 13. The problem with all of those prodigies in this universe is that they don't have like soul resonance with the person that is their instrument, because they haven't like lived life, so they can't like understand the essence of the music. I don't fuck. This was a terrible idea. So I wanted to do this whole thing about resonance and dissonances of the soul, because in music there are like certain intervals that are resonant and certain ones that are dissonant, and how you need both of them in a song to make it sound like it actually has musical variety in it, and you need some dissonance of the soul to... Why did I ever think this was a good idea? What I'm talking about is that there are some chords in music that just kind of sound a little weird, not too weird, but kind of weird. But like if you resolve them well, then they actually end up sounding nice. Like, And so my whole idea is that, like, some dissonance is necessary because you need space from people, or it's okay to disagree with people, but, like, you also need to resolve it for the story to be complete. Why did I ever think this was a good idea? You know what? I'm just kind of gonna leave that lump of cancer alone for now and move on to omitting a totally different but equally bad lump of cancer. Okay, in all honesty, I don't think this next one is as bad as humans turning into instruments, but like, in the same way that segregation was probably better than slavery, both bad, okay? Like, just bad. No! Just no! This one I'm gonna call the Starboy, which should give you a good enough idea of how cringe this was. For this, you need a little bit of backstory. I used to go to a school where people took like short trips with their classes. In 6th grade, we went to Arizona for a week as a class. And in it, there was this cabin that we went to with this guy that was like hosting our school every year, and it was a whole thing, and it's like a grand tradition or whatever. And there isn't enough room in the cabin for all 15 students plus 3 teaching chaperones plus the guy that actually lives there, so the majority of us had to sleep in sleeping bags out on the grass. I was aware of this fact. What I wasn't aware of is just how cold it can get at night in Arizona in April. And so I had these short-ass shorts and this like tank top for pajamas that I was wearing in a sleeping bag that wouldn't close because the fucking zipper was busted, so I just kind of had to fold it over myself in these like thin-ass pajamas in like low 50, high 40 degree weather. It was fucking bad. I don't exactly know how this idea formed, but it must have come from something related to the weird elements happening over there in Arizona. Because I was digging through the abandoned projects folder in my Google Drive, and I want to believe that I had heat stroke, because I do not want to acknowledge that I am a person who, in good conscience, was at one point in my life capable of writing something this terribly cringe. Most of it was just 2.5 pages of just like circular rambling of this like, I think she was 15, this 15-year-old girl who was getting grilled by her mom for getting a B+ in honors chemistry or something like that. And then there was this whole thing about how the mom had a business that failed and that somehow got them deported to another country where they're not actually from. But that country is actually a spacefaring empire that's kind of a sci-fi dystopia, but also not a sci-fi dystopia. I'm not entirely sure, but I think the failing business thing was my 12-year-old self trying to make a commentary about capitalism. I was taking out my anger at one of my teachers who kind of had like really different expectations for everybody else, and he had really high expectations for me for some reason, and I don't understand, because he would like give me math that was more advanced than everybody else, and he would fucking like return my written assignments and essays and stuff even though it was like 3 pages of crap and people just wrote 2 paragraphs of crap and got A's. And believe me, I read their crap. My crap was better than their crap. Only by a little bit, but still! I mean, in hindsight, this teacher was probably one of the best ones I ever had because he really wanted me to make an effort, but like, 12 years old? You gotta give me a break, dude. Which leads me to my biggest problem as a writer between 5th, 6th, and half of 7th grade. was comprehensibility. I was trying to tackle some really complicated concepts about politics and philosophy and nihilism for some reason in those stories, but I just completely and utterly failed at making it actually understandable because the reasoning was just so circular and I made so many assumptions about the reader and I didn't know how to communicate things properly, so I just kind of called people idiots for me not being able to explain it well. But anyway, this was what the majority of the actual story was going to be, which I never actually ended up writing. Much like the situation that I was in, this girl also had to sleep outside of a cabin in the woods because apparently she had family members that are sleeping inside the house and there was no room for her, so they just kind of chucked her outside. Oh god, the persecution complex. And much like I was when I came up with that idea, she was super cold and stuff, and she was like looking out into the sky and she saw some stars that were like coming towards her and slowly realized that it was actually a boy about a year younger than her with like a mullet for some reason. I wrote about him really ethereally and romantically almost, and like she would take his hand and they would go frolicking near the riverside or something like that together, and they would talk about like mostly philosophy. This whole thing was just an excuse for me to get all my weird philosophical ideas out. Oh my god. Oh my god. I just had a revelation. I know where the Star Boy came from! There was a song by this fucking emo edgelord. You may have heard of him. He's called Alan Walker. It was called Alone. I was listening to that non-stop on that trip for some reason, and I don't know why, but I think it stemmed from the lyrics of that song. Lost in your mind, I wanna know, am I losing my mind? Never let me go. If this night is not forever. Oh, I remember the fucking... If this night is never ever, if we are together, I know I'm not. So fucking emo. I titled one of my chapters, The New (parentheses Old House), and there's this little shit in my class who I fucking hated. And this guy fucking hated me too, and he was like, how can the house be old and new at the same time? That's not what his voice sounded like, but you know. And in all my unearned confidence, I was like, oh, you plebeian, you clearly cannot comprehend the concept which I am writing about, despite the fact that it obviously requires context, which you obviously do not have. Oh, you small-minded, feeble little creature. Ow. I swear to God, I'm gonna need to get surgery one day because I do that so fucking much. Hey, speaking of surgery, let's talk about little kids getting FNAF-inspired artificial organs. So, background info, I also wrote this on a school trip. My school has this program where you can like apply to go on various trips abroad if you get in from like a big pool of applicants and stuff, and I was selected before gestures broadly happened to go on a trip to Japan that lasted, I think, 10 days? And while we were there, we were kind of tagging along with another school who was going to their annual ski camp, so we spent quite a few hours on a bus, and I knew that was gonna happen, so I brought my pencil case and notebook. Long bus ride with no Google Doc. Teachers and basically strangers, most of whom don't even speak the same language as I do. Sounds like a recipe for complete insanity. Especially when I am the main ingredient. I want to write something horror related, I'm not entirely sure why, and I have this notebook that I wrote, if I can fucking find where the goddamn front is. And I wrote down like 50 horror concepts, but the handwriting is so messy that I can't read half of them. I have a page here called 15 ethnically varying names and symbolism. The first one is... Okay, I'm not even gonna try to pronounce this, even though I'm the one that fucking came up with it, but it's VALYERIE space TIMIK. I don't want to know. In the description here, it says vivacious, but not one for... Okay, that word is either radar or valor, and I think it's valor. Timid. Is that where Timic came from? Why would you, what? This makes no sense! Just look at this shit and tell me you can read it. I fucking dare you. I ended up writing this really weird story about this father that is essentially based off of William Afton from FNAF, who has a kid that died and needed an organ transplant, so he created artificial organs and, like, tested on people with them, but then, like, he put it in his kid, but he forgot to replace it because it was a small heart for a small kid, and then the kid ends up fucking dying in a dumpster. Apparently he has 3 kids. The youngest one is the one that died, and the oldest one is the one that doesn't know about any of it but died for another reason, and then the middle child is like the Michael Afton that's like going after his father, or is it his father? Yeah, it says that the kid's name is Felix and is a 9-year-old. Yeah, I'm not making this up. Look, I fucking highlighted Felix, 9-year-old. I mean, I was obviously riffing off of FNAF here. I think I was reading the second Fazbear Frights book, and that's the reason why I wrote it. I think that combined with watching way too much game theory. In case you didn't know, I'm a loyal theorist. A very loyal theorist. I don't know why I wrote a lot of story premises in which, like, the government is fucking with everything, but, like, I don't want to know. And for some reason, all of these stories either ended with the main character dying, or one of the main characters dying, or one of the most important characters dying. Somebody had to die, and it was almost always suicide. I was a disturbed child. Still kinda am, but most of these ideas are from, like, one to 3 years ago, I think, so, like, slightly less disturbed now. And those are just the ones that I found the weirdest. There are tons of other strange ones that I came up with, such as that one time I really just wanted to write essays about the concept of virtue despite having no knowledge of moral philosophy at all. I don't like to admit it, but I think that was inspired by The Good Place. A maximum level cringe, literal Wattpad LGBT love story between these 2 guys in this really conservative town called, like, Seneca, South Carolina, or something like that, and it's 95% Wattpad tropes and 5% me making Bruce Springsteen references for 30 pages in the year 2019! Or maybe some really big brain boys with ocean blue eyes and oily mullets for some— I was obsessed with guys with mullets for some reason, and I don't know why. But this guy with an oily, unwashed mullet living in a futuristic ghetto that gets bombed, in which 2 of the apparently smartest people in the universe find a way to express their incredibly nihilistic views on philosophy through this weird, rambly story about forced recruitment into a military against their own country. All in space, of course! Or how's this? A story deeply inspired by The Promised Neverland and The Giver by Lois Lowry, you don't need to know what either of those are, in which a girl spends her entire childhood just getting smarter and smarter because she, like, worships productivity. Oh god, the projection. Who meets a friend who's the first person she's ever met that was younger than her but also smarter than her, who, like, opens her eyes up to the concept that authority is flawed, and they escape school together only to realize that some kids are born and raised in schools in which they're basically forced labor camps in which you can get shot and killed for being dumb. Should probably mention that kids are actually raised by their school instead of by their parents in this story, and, like, they only ever get to meet their families when they're, like, siblings that go to the same school, and oh god, the persecution complex. And of course, why not end the list with the most stupid, the most strange, the most batshit insane premise of them all. Ladies, NBs, and gentlemen, I once thought it was a good idea to make a musical theater production in the style of Hamilton about, get this, game theory! I am being dead serious right now. I have a Google Doc on my computer that's like 15 pages long that's literally just rambling notes about a story about MatPat in musical form, one of the lines of which, by the way, says MatPat comes out of the closet. Okay, before you say anything, I know MatPat's straight. I knew it back then. The whole idea about it was that he recorded his videos in his closet. And so the whole point is that when he gets an upgrade and realizes that he can turn it into a career, he comes out of the closet into a recording studio. Despite the fact that he still to this day records in a closet. Yeah, I'd like to return quickly to that idea that 6th grade me was quite bad at, like, comprehensibility and actually making things that made sense and were understandable to basically anybody with a normal brain. Let me know if you guys want a part 2 where I go more in depth into some of these, by the way, because I got tons. But in the meantime, I really do hope you guys enjoyed this video. I didn't really include a lot of skits in this because, like, I think the material speaks for itself in the context of this video. I don't need to dress up in a thing and like do a funny voice to convince you that my mind is batshit insane. It is weird. Like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you want to see more, comment what you thought if you got something to say, and oh my god, please share these videos around with your friends manually, whether that be like an Instagram post or something like that, just to spread my channel around if you really want to see it grow, because at this point, that's the only way I can grow my channel, because the YouTube algorithm just really hates me. But in the meantime, thank you all very much for watching. I do sincerely hope you enjoyed this video, and this is PDB Ash, signing off.